Sweden might be known for its balls of meat, but they don't mind a puck of vulcanized rubber either. Here are the Swedish Hockey League arenas. Starting off with Scandinavium. In the French league we saw Alp Arena and Arena Ice, but I think Scandinavium tops a lot of them. The building itself is Pringaloid in shape, like a less pronounced saddle dome. They do call Gothenburg the Calgary of Sweden after all. In case you were wondering, this was built over a decade before the Saddle Dome, so they didn't copy it. However, suspiciously, they started building it just a year after Pringles were first released. I'm not making any allegations, I'm just presenting the facts. But in all seriousness, this does seem like a great venue. Looks cozy in here. Loft BG Arena. Oddly enough, this arena's design was actually partially inspired by a Canadian venue, Canadian Tire Centre, as well as Hartwell Arena in Helsinki. The arena was opened just 4 days after 9/11, which I know did happen several thousand kilometers away, but still some people must have been a little apprehensive about visiting the grand opening. Either way, it went off without a hitch, and a week later, Färjestad won their first official game at the venue. Husana Garden. There can be no garden more tranquil than one that's named after a company that makes chainsaws and dirt bikes. Certainly beats the sounds that nature has to offer. They do also make hedge trimmers, so Husqvarna Garden is actually a fitting name, to be fair. This place has an interesting origin story, as it was built on the site of their old arena. However, their old arena was never demolished. They just sort of built around it so the rink could still be used during construction. Teera Arena. Now we're out in a place called Leksand, which is a town that has just over 6,000 inhabitants. Yes, that means that the entire town's population would not fill this arena. Well, perhaps if they bought their pets a ticket. Inside there's an interesting seating layout with a little bit of terracing mixed in, which is common in this part of the world. Another thing that seems to be quite common in this league in particular are these wraparound video boards, which is obviously no bad thing. Saab Arena. You might be thinking, hang on, I thought Saab went out of business. Well, they don't make cars anymore, but the first A in Saab stands for aeroplane. And they do still make aeroplanes. They've clearly bought the naming rights so that Linköping fans choose Saab when purchasing their next jet. In fact, I think they sell them at the gift shop, which I know does sound ridiculous, but you must remember that they specialize in small single-engine fighter jets. You couldn't fit a big passenger plane in a gift shop? That just wouldn't be feasible. Most gift shops are no more than 200 square meters in size. What are you, crazy? And now we head to Coop Norrbotten Arena. I'm not gonna lie, when I first visited Europe, I thought those little corner shops were called Coop, not Co-op. But to be fair, there's not even a hyphen or a space on the signs I was looking at. Anyway, this arena was originally known as the Dolphin because, well, let's go back outside. Does it look like a dolphin? Yeah, I mean, it looks more like a dolphin than most arenas do, I suppose. Just like the outline of Sweden looks more like a penis than most countries do. I wasn't going to mention it, but it is true. Malmo Arena. This place was designed by a guy called Mats Mattsson. Nothing else to add on the matter, I'm just pointing it out. With a few hundred more seats than Scandinavium, it is the largest arena. Not in Sweden as a whole, but in the Swedish Hockey League. Which makes sense because although Malmo is not the largest city in Sweden, it's just a relatively short drive away from Copenhagen. So perhaps it attracts some Denmarkian hockey fans as well. I don't know. Either way, judging from these pictures, it looks like they put that large capacity to good use. Sitting on the dock of the harbour is Haglunds Arena. This venue actually applied to host the 2024 Eurovision Song Contest, but was rejected. The local gay population has not yet recovered from this decision. It seems like an excellent arena, but still I think it's a sensible choice not hosting it here. I mean, all of the singers and dancers would have been slipping about on the ice. And also it's in Ornsköldsvik, which is not that far away from the Arctic Circle, relatively speaking. The reindeer-led sleds are not sufficient to transport so many visitors. BG Hockey Centre. BG has nothing to do with the musical group with the high-pitched vocals. It's a manufacturing group with a very deep and masculine voice. They've lent their name to what is the smallest venue in the league. However, despite its minuscule capacity, there's still a lot going on in here. What stands out the most is this little section of seating tucked away back here. I like it. Those seats are right on top of the ice and fire. Husana Arena. Much like a venue we saw earlier, this was built on the site of its predecessor. Unlike the arena we saw earlier, this one's predecessor was burnt to the ground. Actually, its predecessor's predecessor was burnt to the ground. It is somewhat ironic that an ice arena burned to the ground, but not quite as ironic as a fire station being burnt to the ground, I suppose. Anyway, I quite like the layout in here as well. In particular, how the seats in the upper tier are right on top of the action. I feel like I'm repeating myself. Skeld Craft Arena. Although this venue opened in 1967, it was completely renovated and transformed into a modern arena in the late 2000s. I don't know whether this has always been the case or if it was a result of the renovation, but the rink is orientated perpendicular to the direction of the arching roof, which is not the norm, although I can think of a few other arenas that are similar. Either way, it makes for an interesting look to see those beams arched down behind the goal at each end. Skeld Craft is a power company. Wonder if they get free electricity here. SCA Arena. Every now and then when I see an initialism, I try to guess what it stands for. Let's have a crack at SCA. I reckon it stands for Swedish, definitely Swedish. The C, Cake? Swedish Cake Association? Oh, it's just a bunch of Swedish words. We're in Sweden. It's a company that deals with timber though. Anyway, as you can see, the seating is not only very steep, but it also rises up considerably in the corners, which just makes the most out of the building's rectangular footprint. This 360-degree video board was the largest of its kind in the country when it was installed 5 or 6 years ago. It has since been usurped. Teera Arena was not only built right next to the Lakers' old home, but it's actually attached to it. Come to think of it, this whole area is densely populated by sports venues. They call it Arena City. It must just have particularly nutrient-rich soil. Sports venues, I believe, typically grow well in areas with high levels of phosphorus. Viva la Vida might mean long live life, but the Vida naming rights contract ends this year. Not that anyone would care about that, I just wanted to point out that I knew what Viva la Vida means. To prove that I can speak fluent Spanish? Spanish. Bern Arena. This venue, squozen between a bandy hall and a football stadium, is the oldest arena in the league, having opened in 1965, which was just about the time that music started getting good. Speaking of which, a Rolling Stones concert here in 1967 was a riot. I mean, literally, it ended in a riot. The ice rink was badly damaged, and I believe Mick Jagger was heard asking people to give me shelter. He also saw that there were some red seats and had them painted black. Nowadays, of course, there is no sign of that damage. It is as sturdy as a citadel. Ruby Tuesday. And those were the Swedish Hockey League arenas. As for my favourite, I was tempted to go with Scandinavium, but I think I'll go with Teera Arena. Maybe I just like the fact that such a small town has such a nice arena. Anyway, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, And as always, thanks for watching, have a good one.